So that is the dance over there, right? The totalitarianism versus innovation.
This conversation starts in the realm of politics, but it quickly moves. Essentially, politics, it's not about statesmanship so much as it is, how do two people get along? How do small communities get along? How the polis, the people, how do the people live together? And is it possible for humanity to move forward with the increased pressures of society without submitting to tyranny or falling into chaos? So remember this as we move forward, that it starts with this question of China and their dance with totalitarianism. But I think even the dance language is a clue as to where we're going.
Innovation versus giving people the freedom and also removing the fear of that totalitarian government, so they have the ability to take risks.
No, it's the dance here too, right? It's in some sense it's the eternal dance. It's the eternal dance. It's the part of the eternal dance between freedom and structure, even, and that's a tough one because there's no freedom without structure. Like I used to play a game with my students when we were talking about.
There's no freedom without structure. Tyranny is structure without freedom. It's just structure. Anarchy is freedom unleashed with no structure. And it's kind of another type of bondage. There's no freedom in anarchy, just like there's no freedom in tyranny. And so as people, we're stuck, you know. And is there a way forward? Is there another way? And that's why I love this conversation and where it's going. It moves from politics into the realm of art and comedy and all these other places. And that's a clue. That's a clue that there is an answer out there. We're going to unpack that.
About Jean Piaget, who was very interested in the development of morality through games. So I say to them, so we're talking about freedom. It's like, okay, freedom. It's freedom from constraint is freedom. All right. Fine. Let's play a game. Do you want to play this game?
Sure.
Okay. You move first.
What do you mean?
That's the game. You can do anything you want.
Look at Joe Rogan's face. What are you getting me into here?
You move first. You think, that's not much of a game. It's like, no, it's the perfect game. You're absolutely free to do anything you want.
Okay.
Well, everybody does what you did. They just sit there. The right amount of rules for freedom is not zero. Say, now I put a chessboard in front of you, and you think...
Okay, so the right amount of rules for freedom to exist is not zero. Okay, it's not zero. That's important.
Board in front of you, and you think, oh my God, all the limitations. I can't throw a basketball on the chessboard, which you certainly can't, not if you're playing chess. But now you know, you move first, or I move the pawn two spaces forward.
I see what you're saying.
So
having some structure and some rules to follow gives people more of a path to
everything.
go out. Yeah.
And and I think this is modeled by music.
Joe is saying that finding the right amount of structure, or the right structure, is the path forward. And so Jordan Peterson goes into music, and this is the clue that harmony is possible within nature. Music gives us that clue that harmony is possible. Music is a unity of particulars. It is a political question. How do I as an individual live in a community? I as a particular, but as a part of the whole. And so we've gone from politics to music, and I think that's just brilliant. I mean, and this is what comes out of dialogue. These guys didn't script this, but this is why dialogue is so powerful. You know, I go back to Joe's question, which is like, what kind of structure? What is the right structure? And I'm going to approach this from a biblical Christian worldview. If you've found any of the videos that I've been making, that's what I do. I'm coming at this from a biblical worldview and trying to remain open to conversations with people that don't have that worldview. So I appreciate you. If you're here and you don't have that, I'd love to hear more from you. But to me, that is the right structure. It's not even the right amount of structure. It's the right kind of structure, is that I live in a world that I didn't create. You know, this is not my world. This is God's world. And then God has revealed to me whatever that structure is. And I don't think of it so much as law as I think of it as a music, as a type of poetry, as like it's like we're all in a big jam session together. Okay, that's a little bit lame, but music is the clue. I love that we go with this into this arena from politics to music, and then eventually into comedy and a few other things.
And this is really worth knowing. This like almost took the top of my head off when I realized it. And it took me about 4 months of thinking to figure this out, because when I was in graduate school at McGill, I became really interested in the reality of evil, and I was very interested in the viability of nihilistic beliefs. You know, why bother if everything's going to disappear in 100 years?
Yeah, meaninglessness, that there's no ultimate meaning or purpose to life, nihilism. And isn't it also true that music is a clue that life isn't meaningless or purposeless?
Life, it's meaningless. In the final analysis, life is meaningless.
Right.
Okay, well, you can make a credible case for that. Now, it's a upsetting case, because once you accept that, first of all, you're anxious and hurt by it. So that's not so good. And second, it kind of makes you aimless. And that's part of nihilism. It's like, you're anxious and upset, but you're also aimless. Because why bother? And fair enough, but you can make a credible case for it. But then I thought, well, when that gets out of hand, maybe you're nihilistic because you're mortal and life ends in death. So you're sort of nihilistic because of suffering. And so then you become nihilistic as a logical response to that. And then what happens? And then what you see is that nihilistic people definitely make suffering worse. Definitely. They make it worse for themselves, for sure. But then they get bitter because their lives are so unbearable.
Yeah, so life is meaningless from a nihilistic perspective, and yet trying to live consistently with that makes life even more meaningless. You've now added sort of insult to injury. You've added more pain on top of the pain, because now the suffering that you've experienced there's no meaning to that suffering. When suffering finds meaning, it doesn't necessarily make the suffering go away, but it gives a purpose to that suffering. So now it's like, from a nihilistic perspective, I could suffer through this life. This life does involve suffering. And then that suffering would have no meaning. Or I could suffer through this life and push through that suffering to find that meaning. That's a better option than the nihilism. And I think that's what's problematic about nihilism is you can't live consistently with it.
And they start to take it out on other people. So if you are nihilistic, that's not neutral. It gets bad real fast. So then I thought, well, are there any antidotes to meaninglessness? And rational antidotes are hard to come by, because you can just say, well, who cares? If in 1,000 years we're all going to be dead, why get out of bed in the morning? You can't really mount a rational case why that's not reasonable.
Can you argue through nihilism from a purely rationalistic standpoint? I wonder about that. I think the nihilism that we're experiencing in society today is a direct result to Nietzsche's work and others who basically say, God is dead. And if God is dead, then yeah, there is no purpose to life. Like, that is a logical conclusion. You go from theism to deism to naturalism to nihilism. Yeah, after naturalism comes nihilism. That's kind of a logical conclusion. And then once you arrive at nihilism, you have to make a choice. Are you going to try to live consistently with that nihilism? Or are you going to push through that and realize the reason that we've arrived at nihilism is not because the world is meaningless, but it's because the world is actually meaningful and we're missing it?
Now, I'm not saying it is reasonable, but I thought about music. Music is a very strange art form. I had a great journalist friend of mine. He said to me the other day, he said, all art aspires to the condition of music, which I thought was great. But music, you think about the revitalizing effect music continues to have in our culture, especially among young people, and that's really, really been the case since the beginning of the 60s. It's like we got more nihilistic and less religious and all of that as our culture became more secular and more rational, more materialistic. And at the same time, the power of music as a cultural phenomenon just grew and grew and grew and grew.
It has a revitalizing effect. So in the midst of as nihilism and meaninglessness grows, so does music that has this revitalizing effect. I think that's a really good observation. This is where I want to bring in Schaeffer, because he's going to do a great job of unpacking the secular worldview and the biblical Christian worldview and the very different conclusions that we draw from each of those. The secular worldview, we've already said, is ending us in nihilism. The biblical Christian worldview is going to point us onward to worship, which is a harmony that we've been talking about, as a kind of unity and diversity brought together in a harmony, which I find beautiful. Of course, again, I'm coming at this from a biblical Christian worldview. Schaeffer is a Christian theologian, philosopher, and he is going to compare for us the sort of rationalistic person to the person who has discovered divine revelation. And so my question is, well, not my question, my assumption is, what I believe is that the structure that we're looking for is divine revelation. Now, it's not laws and things like that, but it's more like music, like we're talking about with Jordan Peterson, or the poetry that we find in Scripture.
Up to a certain point in the development of the Renaissance, it could have gone in a good direction or a poor one. Freedom was introduced both in the North by the Reformation and in the South by the Renaissance. But in the South, it brought forth license. The reason was that the humanism of the Renaissance had no way to bring forth meaning for the individual things, for the particulars, nor absolutes in the area of morals. Humanism, which began with man being central, eventually has no meaning for man. But in the North, the men of the Reformation...
Okay, and that's the nihilism that we're talking about. The humanism leads to a lack of meaning for man. So in the North, he's talking about the Reformation.
Standing under the Scripture, regained direction, and the totality of life, as well as nature, became a thing of beauty and dignity.
Beauty and dignity.
Man was given a reason for being great, and he was given a reason for freedom, and yet compelling absolute values.
Yeah. So again, so we're talking about freedom, form, structure, and what kind of structure is it? And again, I resist even the word structure. Form maybe is a better word, because that can indicate some kind of art. And that's why I think Schaeffer points to beauty. So I wonder if now we get to talk about mosh pits and punk rock music.
Music gives you the intimation of meaning, right, directly. So I used to watch punk rockers. I went to a Ramones concert once, which was really fun. We were up in the second floor of this theater in Montreal, and the Ramones were playing on stage like 100 feet away with their huge stadium equipment. It was so loud in there. Like, I had to listen to the whole concert with my ears plugged, and I was still like 3/4 deaf for 3 days. And beneath us on the stage, sort of in front of the stage, there was a flat place, and all these punks were down there smashing into each other and doing this really rough dance. And I thought, this is so cool. We got all these nihilistic punks in here, like half beating themselves up, dancing.
Well, and so he's describing a mosh pit, which is actually something I have a little bit of experience with, a little bit of expertise in that. I love that Jordan Peterson is telling a story about him being at a Ramones concert. But you know that if you grew up in a punk rock scene like I did, if you've experienced punk rock music, if you've experienced that culture, you know that the best kind of mosh pit is the one that goes in a circle. The circle pit is where that passion, that anger, all the stuff that you're working out through that mosh pit meets a type of structure and a type of form where you're all moving in a circle, this mass of people, and it's chaotic and it's painful, and you might fall over, and there's so many people that as you fall into the person that's in front of you, and that person probably doesn't know it, but they're supporting you and keeping you from falling. And then if you do happen to fall, if you're in a good mosh pit, the person behind you doesn't want to trip over you and fall themselves, so they try to pick you up and put you back into the mosh pit, and then you just keep this circle pit going. And it is an amazing actual example of freedom within form that we're talking about. The chaos, the dance of chaos and human freedom and tyranny. What would it? Of course, there's no tyrannical mosh pits out there. It's the opposite. It's the opposite.
And being taken in by this rough music that gave them, even in their aggressive nihilism, a sense of meaning. I thought that was so cool. So why does music do that? That's a good question, because people think of music as a non-representational art. It doesn't represent anything. It's not like a drawing or a picture, or even dance where you can act something out. Not that it's, I didn't say it was without content.
I see what you're saying. But you said representation.
Yeah,
but
well, you could say it represents emotions, and fair enough.
Yeah.
But I was thinking more like a picture of an actual thing. Okay, so let's think about what music is. First of all, it's a pattern. So non-patterned music is noise. It's a pattern. But then it isn't one pattern. It's multiple patterns layered on top of one another.
Okay, so he's talking about structure. Remember, we started this conversation with the political question of like what structures can be in place to allow for human freedom to thrive in a community of people, which is political. And he's describing the structure of music. And he said non-pattern music is noise. We're going to talk about John Cage and Francis Schaeffer here in a little bit, which is a great example of someone trying to almost live out those nihilistic, sort of postmodern, irrational worldview in music. And where it ends up is clever. And Schaeffer does a great job of using that as an example.
Cage believed the universe is a universe of chance. To express this, he produced music by chance. Cage's music turned out to be sheer noise.
You gotta love Schaeffer's take here. We see as someone tries to live out a secular worldview, or like John Cage, a worldview that believes that everything has come by chance, that we're going to live according to that. And so we can see in music what we would potentially see politically if we cannot respond to the world the way we're supposed to. And I believe we live in God's world, and we should respond to God in worship, not just singing songs or going to worship services, which is part of that, but a life of worship. And if I, as an individual, and as we corporately live our lives in a way that is honoring to God, then there will be a unity and a harmony in the midst of diversity and freedom. That's the hope. Not even the hope. I mean, if you read the Bible, that's the way it's going to be. That's the beatific vision. That's the heavenly kingdom. It's a kingdom where all of this is sorted out, and there is harmony, and there is freedom. And yet there's a diversity of people and different languages and different ethnicities and all of that coming together, all in one big banquet feast, which is kind of cool.
In a harmonious manner, and in a manner that indicates, in some sense, communication between all the patterned layers, because they have to go together. And so, what's the world? Well, the world's made of objects. It's like, no, it's not. It's made of patterns. So music is just like the world, because the world's made of patterns. And then music has layered patterns that are all moving together in a harmonious manner. And so what do you do when you hear that, especially if it's got a beat? Well, then you move your body. And you want to, right? The music calls to you to move your body. So now you're moving your body in sync with the patterned layers of the world.
Okay. Anybody that's a Plato fan, Socrates, your antenna go up here, because he's talking about parts of the soul, the noetic, the wisdom part of the soul, the mind, the heart, the spirited part of the soul, and then, the body. How do I have this imbalance in me? Well, I have kind of an internal reality. I have an external reality. I have a mind, but I also have a body, and I have a spirit, and sometimes we're pulled in all these different places, and yet we long for harmony, not just a harmony of myself, but a harmony of myself in my community. So I long for harmony within community. I long for harmony within nature. I see harmony in nature, and music is a way that we can express, we can be involved in that natural medium that we see.
That's meaning. And then there's more to it. So that's so cool. Is music is an analog of the structure of existence itself. And it calls to you to take part in that. And then, so maybe you dance by yourself, or maybe even better, you dance with someone else. And so then you both bring your bodies into this patterned relationship with this multi-layer harmony together in a spontaneous way, indicating that you can both play and are therefore potentially trustworthy future mates.
And that is the political question that we're. And again, when I'm saying political, I don't mean statesmanship, and I don't mean jockeying for political power. I mean that which has to do with the polis, the people. How do we interact with one another? How do we live life together? And the dance is the basic political structure. The dance is the microcosm of the political structure that we're trying to solve, or we're trying to rescue, maybe. And we're trying not to fall into tyranny or chaos. And here we have this picture of the dance. There is unity within diversity. There is the individual person who is a sum of parts. There's another person who's another sum of parts. And those bodies fit together. And that's written in nature. The reason, he's talking about two dance partners, it's usually male and female, masculine and feminine. There's a reason that those two dance partners fit together. It's written in their biology, in their nature. Yes, of course, two men can dance together, two women can dance together, a group of people can dance together. Yes, that's true. But that dance of the dance of two dance partners, male and female, is a very interesting portrayal of, again, the unity that sort of beckons to us, that we see, that we long for, and I think ultimately causes us to look even outside of the natural world. The natural world is giving us these clues.
That's unbelievably cool. And birds dance. It's not just human beings, So this is a deep thing. And then music does something else too. It puts you on the border between chaos and order, because a boring song does exactly what you expect it to do and gets dull very quickly. And an unlistenable song is so random you can't follow it.
Okay. So again, that's tyranny and that's anarchy. A boring song is just structure. It's just like you're following the structure of music, the way music should be, beep, boop, bop. But a song that's too random, that is perpetual variation without resolution, which is a Schaeffer line, then you can't listen to it. You can't follow it. There's no story. There's no melody. Where are the notes leading me?
And so what you want is predictability with a leaven of unpredictability. And then that puts you right on the edge. That's the zone of proximal development. Vygotsky discovered that.
Like a Hendrix song.
Yeah, like a Hendrix song. Well, any great music does that.
But I mean, Hendrix has so much creativity inside the structure of the song, because there's riffs that he'll do.
Right. And everyone loves, oh man, I went to this bar in Nashville. This band was playing Kelly's Heroes. A great guitarist, best guitarist I've ever seen. And they were playing old country music with a heavy blues rock twist. So they do this great version of Ghost Riders in the Sky, like 15 minutes long. And this brilliant guitarist just goes way out on a limb. And everybody in the crowd, it was so fun to be there. They're just thrilled to death because they're watching this man doing the same thing that surfers do. He's like dancing on the edge of chaos and order in this virtuosic manner. And everyone is so taken by that it just lifts them out of the normality of their existence. You see this joy just transfuse them. And that's because they got an intimation of genuine meaning. And it's not amenable to rational criticism, which is the thing that I thought that struck me as so miraculous about music, and why it has this element of salvation. It's like it puts you directly in touch with the meaning that sustains you in life directly. And it shows you what that would be, which is something like to observe the harmonious interplay of the patterns of being stacked on top of one another, and then to bring yourself into alignment with that, which is what yogis strive to do, and what disciplined athletes strive to do, and what we celebrate in athletics. And it's all a reflection of the same thing. And that's real. It's real, that meaning.
It's real also in what it imparts on other people. It's not just, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. Like, even though people can play beautiful music when no one's around, it's not the same as playing beautiful music in front of people, because there's a thing that happens when people interact with that music.
Well, you see that, if you get lucky, you go to I went to a Leonard.
Okay, there's a lot there. And Joe's point is that the meaning that we derive from music, which is powerful, which what Jordan Peterson just described, actually becomes more meaningful when it's shared in community. So do you see that we're back to the political question? How can we move forward without submitting into tyranny or falling into chaos, but finding a sense of harmony within society? And music gives us a clue that there's a way forward. And Jordan Peterson takes us back to the nihilism of like, nihilism is not the answer, folks. Like, there's more to it. And he talks about being lifted out of that meaninglessness and to a type of salvation. That, and again, as a Christian, I hear those terms and I can't help but think about Jesus. I can't help but think about the fact that, yes, we long for a deliverance. And is there sort of a music to the way God has revealed himself to us? I think there is. I think there's poetry. I think there's art. I think there's comedy. God has revealed himself to us, but music does play a particular role in this. And what it ultimately points me to is worship, the place of freedom from tyranny and from chaos, both of my own soul and of the world around me, is when I've surrendered my life to God. And I live my life in this world as an act of worship to him, but not just me, a community of people around me that we call the church. And unfortunately, the church has not historically done a great job of displaying the ideal there, the true consummation of that reality is the people of God worshiping God for the glory of God. And what it does is it reflects, in a way, we're able to reflect God's glory to the people around us. That's it right there. So we got to go into Schaeffer here.
The men of the Reformation had no problem trying to derive meaning, universals, from the individual things, that is, the particulars, the way the humanistic men of the Renaissance did. Because the Bible gives a unity between the universal and the individual things, that is, the particulars. It gives us knowledge both about God as the ultimate universal and about man and nature. This music is the direct result of the Reformation culture, the biblical Christianity of that time. The composer is Johann Sebastian Bach. His work is certainly the consummation of those composers that came out of the Reformation. Look, here in his own handwriting, the abbreviation in Latin, "To God alone be the glory."
And so there we have it. Worship is, this is an act of worship, right? This music isn't like worship music the way we think of like modern evangelical worship songs or something like that, but it is music that a composer created for the glory of God. And when you live life for the glory of God, your life is an act of worship. And worship is the way forward. How else can we bring together a society of individual people in harmony where everyone is free? Well, we all live our lives, a life of worship before the creator of the universe. And in that way, we can all live in harmony with him. He's made it possible through the life, death, and sacrifice of his son. He's made the path forward so that we can come to him and worship, so that we can have that harmony again, that unity, not only of my soul, but of our community and of our relationship with God. All right, if you are with me, I want to end with this. I will leave this William Temple quote in the description here. What is the chief end of man? Man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. That's why we're here. We're made to worship. We're made to worship God. What is the political question? How can a bunch of people get together? How can we resist tyranny? How can we resist chaos? The tyranny and the chaos we see is a reflection of what's going on in our own souls. We long for harmony. The only way to find that harmony is through worship. The only path to true worship is through the Son. And this is it. Now may the God of peace himself sanctify you entirely, and may your spirit and soul and body be preserved complete, without blame, at the coming of our Lord Jesus. If you're still here, if this is meaningful for you, even if you're not a believer, if you've hung in there with this discussion, I love that. I want to hear from you guys. And if you know of anybody that needs to hear this message, please share this. That's how we can be agents of change in this world. So I will catch you in the next one.